Welcome back to Backspace Academy. Before we start the lab, make sure that you've got a copy of the Introduction to AWS lab notes, and you should already have that from the previous labs. The chapter that we're going through is creating a web server with EC2. From the AWS Management Console, we need to search for EC2. And there we have that. Okay. So now we're in the EC2 Management Console. We're going to launch an EC2 instance now, and that will be a Linux instance. We just click on Launch Instance here. We could also go to the Instances menu here and do that same thing, but we're just going to do it from here. Just click on the red Launch Instance. Now what we're going to do is that we are going to launch a Linux server, but that Linux server is also going to be running the WordPress application. What we need to do is that we need to find an Amazon machine image that has both the Linux application and or the Linux operating system and the WordPress application. The way that we do that is that we go to the AWS Marketplace. Now the AWS Marketplace is a marketplace for these machine images, and lots of vendors, including AWS, and we can see here we've got Trend Micro, Juniper and Barracuda. They all supply machine images to do different things. So we're going to search and see if there is a Bitnami WordPress AMI. Bitnami is a great company that has been producing lots of different AMIs that are free, and they also provide great support for those as well. So they're a great company and they produce really good quality AMI. So I'm going to use that one, and I'm going to click on enter and see if I can find a WordPress AMI created by Bitnami. So there we can see WordPress certified by Bitnami and Automattic. Automattic are the developers of WordPress. So this is a pretty good AMI to use. We'll just use the standard one here. You don't have to worry about the multi-site one. We'll click on select. Now, when we select this Amazon machine image, the first thing that comes up will be this list of costs. Now, don't be too concerned about this. The software, that's free. It's open source and free software. We're not going to get billed for that. The WordPress application is free, and so is Linux. But you can see here we've got costs of 1.2 cents per hour. Now, you will not be incurring that cost if your account is less than 12 months old, because this will be covered under the AWS free tier. Let's scroll down and we'll click on continue. Now we need to choose an instance type. And of course, we're going to choose the one that is going to be free tier eligible. So on the free tier, we are allowed to launch a T2 micro instance and not get billed for it. We'll click on Next, Configure Instance Details. Now here we can see we have our default VPC has been selected. Now remember, the VPC is our own private space within the AWS cloud. When we create an AWS account for the first time, this default VPC is created for us, and it has a lot of things already done to set that up to allow a web server to operate and receive traffic from the wider internet. If you have created other VPCs, and you can do that yourself, you can of course create multiple VPCs, and many of them up to the limit of your account. But here we're going to use the default VPC that has been created by AWS, because that is set up ready to go for us. The other thing that we need to make sure that we do is we need to make sure that we've got a public IP address assigned to this web server. If we don't do that, then this web server will not be discoverable on the internet. So we need to make sure that that is enabled. So by default here, it is enabled for us. So I'm just going to select enable just to be sure. We'll click on now, add storage. We'll leave the storage as it is. That is going to be fine for us. We'll click on add tags. Now we can add tags to this that can allow us to track these resources if we need to. I'm going to put a name tag onto this. Now when we select name, we need to make sure that the name tag has a capital N in front of it. If we use a lowercase n, the tag will still be created, but it won't come up as a name for our instance. So make sure that you do capital N here. The value, I'm just going to call it Backspace Academy WordPress. That's fine as a name. Next, we need to configure our security group. Now, a security group is like a firewall that we can associate with an EC2 instance. Now, that is additional to any firewall rules that you may put in your Linux operating system. So it is possible to have multiple layers of firewall. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to create a new security group, and we need to make sure that that security group allows inbound access to our web server from the wider internet. Now, normally the standard is for when you create a security group that it will be basically blocking all access to it, and you need to add these rules. Now, the Bitnami AMI has automatically set this up for us. So it's allowed for secure shell access on port 22. What that means is that if we have AWS credentials, we can access the Linux operating system of this EC2 server. We're not going to need to do that, but we'll leave that as it is. The other thing that we need to do is that we need to have HTTP and HTTP access for the wider internet. So people need to be able to view our web server, of course. So that comes in on port 80 and 443, and that's going to be for anywhere to come in. So by doing that, we just click on Review and Launch, and that security group will be automatically associated with this EC2 instance, and it will allow traffic from the wider internet to view our website. We'll click on Review and Launch. So we can see here we're going to get our WordPress AMI is going to be installed. The instance type will be a T2 Micro. And here we can see our security group is going to have access, very important, on HTTP and HTTPS, which is SSL. Now, we won't be connecting in using HTTPS or SSL. The reason being is that to have that set up, you need to create an SSL certificate and associate that with your instance. So we're not going to do that. It's a little bit advanced for us at this stage. Our tag, we can see here we've got our name tag. So everything looks fine. We'll click on Launch. It's going to ask for a key pair. Now, we would need that key pair if we were going to be connecting into this instance via Secure Shell and accessing the Linux operating system of that server. Now, we're not going to need to do that. We're just going to be doing everything through the WordPress application, so we don't need to create a key pair. So I just need to click on this I acknowledge that that you won't have access to the direct operating system. Let's click on Launch Instances. Now, this will take quite some time, quite a few minutes. So go away, get yourself a cup of coffee and come back, and the launch status will change, and you will be able to have a look at your EC2 instance. So here we can see the instances are now launching. We'll just scroll down and view those instances. So although they're launching, now I've got an old one here that I've terminated. So this is the one we're interested in, and it's still pending. So go away. Oh, it's now running. Now, although it's running, it's not necessarily having the WordPress application up and running as yet. And so it'll need to go through some additional checks there. So I'm just going to have a look at the status checks first. And we can see here it is running, the system is running, and the instance is running. That looks fine. We're going to see whether we can actually access our WordPress application. So what we'll do now is we'll click on the instance ID. And here we can see we've got a public IP address. So remember when we launched this, we set enable a public IP address so that we can actually access this web server or the wider internet and people can have a look at our web server. We've also got this domain name here. So either of those we can access. I'm going to click on that and see what happens. So the site can't be reached. What that means is that we need to give it a bit more time, probably about 5 minutes or so, for it to go through all of its checks and make sure that this application is up and running. So go away, have that cup of coffee, and then come back, and we should be in business. Okay, so after quite a few minutes, I've just kept refreshing this browser screen here. Now I've got a different screen. It says your connection is not private. The reason for that is that we're trying to connect into this web server using SSL, and it's not allowing us because we don't have an SSL certificate associated with this web server. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to connect in without SSL, and the way that we do that is we just get that domain name that we opened up. Just going to copy that, paste that into here, and that will open up with HTTP, not HTTPS. There we go. We've got our WordPress application up and running. Everything looks good. So our users can access our WordPress blog or whatever it is that we've got here. But at this point in time, we can't access it as administrator. So if we go into WP admin, so we just go /, so WP-admin, and that will take us into the login screen to our WordPress application. So we need this in order to create blog posts and all that sort of thing. So if we don't have that, we're not going to be able to do anything with our WordPress blog. So we need to get that. And the good people at Bitnami, what they have done is that they have outputted through the Linux console the username and password for us. So if we go into the logs, the system logs for our Linux operating system, we will be able to find that. The way that we do that is that we go into Actions, then we go into Monitor and Troubleshoot, and then we go to Get System Log. And that will get all of the outputs from our Linux operating system console. There's a lot here, so we're just going to scroll down that. And here we can see setting the Bitnami application password, and the default application username is user. So we can just go in here, we'll copy this. We'll go back into this login screen here. Our username was user. And we're just going to paste in that password. And that should get us in. There we go. We've logged in as the administrator of our WordPress application. From here, we can go into posts and add a new post. There we go. We can add a new post. We can do whatever we want. Let's have a look at that. So that's all working pretty good. So we can add a new post. We can change the theme, do whatever we want with that WordPress application. So that brings us to the end of this lab. You've learned a lot. You've learned about how to launch a server, associate a security group to that server, how to go into the system logs of that server. Pretty advanced stuff. Now, if you get stuck, make sure that you go back to the lab notes because there is a section on troubleshooting. So I'll just get that up here now. So there we can see we've got our troubleshooting viewing your WordPress application. So if you don't get this screen up here, you can just scroll down here to the troubleshooting section, and that'll go through all of the things that may have gone wrong with your security group or whatever it may be. So I'm just going to get out of that. What we need to do now is we need to clean this all up so that we're not going to get a bill at all, but if we created a second EC2 instance, then we would be getting billed for a second, or for that second EC2 instance. So we need to make sure that we clean this all up. So just close out of that. I'm going to scroll back up to this EC2 instance. I'll click on the instance ID here to get into it, or to get the instance summary of that. To terminate this instance, we need to go to instance state, Now we have options to stop it or terminate it. We're going to terminate it because we don't need it anymore and just get rid of it, and we'll never get billed for that. Click on Terminate Instance, and we just click on Terminate. And we've successfully terminated that instance. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this lab. Pretty advanced one. And again, if you have any troubles, just go to those troubleshooting section of the lab notes. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.